化け物を飼いならせ、レゴシ。それがこの世界の一丁前の男よ。
Carl Jung said that everyone carries a shadow within themselves, a collection of the aspects of ourself that we find undesirable or scary and repress as a result. This shadow is often animalistic and instinctual, with roots dating back to the beginning of primitive existence, and its unrefined characteristics are naturally scary for people in modern society to come to terms with and confront, especially when they realize its internal nature. As such, people tend to project these scary feelings or impulses and try to push them to the seemingly harmless corners of their subconscious, attempting to eliminate them or pretend that they don't exist. But the tricky thing about that is that Jung also believed that the less the shadow is embodied in the individual's conscious life, the blacker and denser it becomes. Beastars is a meticulously contemplative series that is confident enough in its setting, thematic notes, and characters to take its time with the ideas it presents. Availability heuristics built on shallow assumptive thinking, identity, instinct, what we will do to make ourselves feel like we are truly living with purpose. The story is rich with all manner of these sorts of ideas, using the societal dynamics as a backdrop to have the characters internalize, progress, and explore these things. But for me, the most prevailing idea that is tackled across season 1 of the anime is the dichotomy between being afraid of what we ourselves are capable of and being able to have the power to control this, to search for untreaded avenues and achieve a happiness and purpose that most would think is impossible. And of course, this sort of thing is most applicable to the type of carnivorous protagonist who has found himself somewhat isolated by the world he inhabits. A gray wolf with a sensitive heart, someone who is adorably awkward but strongly values connection with all types of creatures. Yet, unfortunately, one who people also tend to unfairly assume is a mean, ill-natured savage due to his appearance and species.
今までと特に変わらないから大丈夫。怖がられても嫌われてもそうやって生きてきた。
However, Legosi finds himself thinking that he cannot entirely blame others for feeling this way, because it is a fact that he, like other carnivores, must fight against his urges and instincts to not only maintain peace in society, but within himself. Because at the beginning of the series, he very nearly eats Haru, slipping and losing control for a moment, which causes him to curse this darker part of him and try to suppress it. But what he initially fails to realize, or rather tries to avoid confronting, is that this instinct is fundamentally tied to who he is. Despite being resented and questioned by people like Louis, Bill, and Juno for not embracing and accepting all of himself, he doesn't see it as a monster he must tame, but instead as a poison and rot that he must cut out completely.
抗えないって言いたいのか、自分の野生に。困ってるっていうのかよ、隠しようもない自分の野生に。
俺はコソコソしなきゃいけないんです。俺が狼が強いってことに希望はないから。
Due to Legosi's yearning for connection, his sense of isolation, and his fear of being rejected, he is afraid of this and has trouble engaging with his inner beast, when he should instead be learning to control it. It's all a pretty blunt allegory of that shadow concept I mentioned. Sooner or later, if you avoid the darkness inside of you, it will be let loose and it'll be much more pathological due to that avoidance. And not only that, but it can be uncomfortable and lonely having to wear a mask all the time while this shadow festers. You can't hide from who you are, but you can confront the truth and work within yourself to change, control, and refine this aspect that would be undesirable into something valuable that is true to who you are, yet not nearly as dangerous as it could have been. But Legosi does not see this at first and buffers himself. He slips into facades, acting less capable and dulling his instincts to appear more friendly than the already extremely friendly person he is. And one can argue that he's justified in doing so, since very few tend to give him a fair evaluation. He's isolated, even though he tries to connect with others. His constant attempts to destroy and avoid a part of himself in a society full of people who embrace exactly what they're supposed to be makes him distant, and despite having a decent amount of friends, and despite his empathy, he's detached and lonely at the start of the story. And consciously or otherwise, he seems to notice that his behavior is incongruous with his true self.
私は悔しいんです。こういうことにいちいち傷ついちゃうから。
あなたが悔しがれるならそれは大事なことだと思います。悔しがったりすることに疲れて俺は慣れたふりしてきたから悔しいと思えるあなたは強いです。
Reflecting on this, Legosi isn't happy that he has dulled himself to feeling the injustices of the world, which indicates that he thinks that what he was doing wasn't quite right, even if it was the proper thing to do. However, due to his kind nature and likely because of his tendency to use these masks, he is more reflective and introspective than most, and he thinks past the shallow labels that society has put on people because he is acutely aware of the possibility of facades. He immediately sees more in Haru than others do, for instance, and is able to judge her not based on reputation, but from what he sees in her as a person. From the beginning, he has a sincere tendency to question society and a desire for truth, apart from the positions that the world seems to thrust onto people. And as such, at this point in his life, he is sick of hiding, not truly being himself, and not reaching out and grasping the things that he wants. He seeks more, and so he seeks expression of all sorts. It's a motivation that is somewhat at odds with his repression of his animal side, but what is growing up if not a cavalcade of contradicting motivations, right? And that's why his outburst on stage with Bill was cathartic. Because while he did lose himself in a rage that showed the deep self-hatred that had been festering due to his fear of his own carnivore nature, he was also able to express himself in a way he rarely, perhaps never, could prior to the performance.
ずっとそうでいたかったよ。
え？
ずっと一匹で落ち込んで立ち直って人知れず生きていたのに、昨日は生まれて初めてそれじゃ気が済まなかったんだ。ただ俺の怒りをぶつけたかった。コントロールしたくなかったんだ。だって俺の気持ちは俺しか持っていないっていうか、うまく言えないけど。
変わったな。
As a result, he takes a sort of reluctant pride in his display, and this sense of catharsis helps him to see his desires and endeavors clearly. We are at our purest when we are reduced to base, simplistic, and primitive emotions and motivations, and with only instinct to guide him, and without the distractions that fogged his vision, Legosi was able to see who he was clearer than ever. So as a result, he takes control and decides to properly introduce himself and connect with Haru. And even if he immediately regrets it and somewhat regresses once put in the situation, it is by no means a one step forward, two steps back sort of scenario. His resolve has put him in situations that he would never have been in previously, and that is synonymous with progression even if the story approaches his arc with a striking realism and hesitance due to his personality. Yet this expression comes at a cost, as he realizes that being able to do the things he likes means giving a freer rein to his carnivore side. And once again, fear takes over. His traumatic experiences at the black market show Legosi how quickly and easily his hunger can take the forefront, and he feels this desire while thinking of Haru, which is terrifying. He's told by Gohin that he more than likely is confusing love with predatory instincts, and that he needs to cut things off, and this leads him to trying to adhere to total and complete avoidance for the safety of others.
醜い欲望だ。俺は何にも勝てない。
He believes at this point that his desire to connect is unrealistic and selfish due to biology and society. And while Legosi only spends a small portion of the story feeling this way, it's still very important for showing that he's still, at this point, very much in the dark with regards to knowing how to live. Instinct and primitive drive is great for expression and seeing what truly matters, but being unable to tame that is obviously no good either. Legosi needs a happy medium and feels unsure of how to achieve it, so he errs on the side of caution.
息も絶え絶えで切羽詰まって苦しいことばかり。こんな感情が簡単に恋だなんて誰が言えるんだよ。もう終わりにしよう。今ならまだ間に合う。これでいいはずなんだよな。肉食と草食の正しい距離きっと保ててる。
It's important to note this mindset of Legosi's at this point in time as a checkpoint for his growth. He wants to grow a bond with Haru, but at this point his fear of hurting her overpowers his desire for connection. And in what I consider to be one of the saddest story beats of the series, Legosi admits to believing that his desire to grow closer with those quote-unquote weaker than him is just a selfish fantasy.
そうかな。俺はいや、なんていうか俺が自己満足でやってるだけだからさ、相手にはいい迷惑かも。
相手？
俺みたいな動物がどう頑張っても小さくてか弱い生き物との距離は埋まらないのにね。
I like to think of Legosi's progression not as a linear line, but an absolute mess, to be frank. It is something of a disaster. Every time he realizes something new, he doubles back and rethinks something. He comes at these issues with different perspectives every time, which only makes him change his mind even more. His desires just happen to be at odds with one another by his perception. He wants to connect, and he wants to protect, but those two things seem to be mutually exclusive, so his journey has tons of peaks and valleys. Yet, as I alluded to earlier, it is still clear that he is progressing, little by little. And from early on, he constantly has a firm eye on what he wants, even if he may not know how to get there. Once Legosi's jealousy is unleashed, he realizes that he legitimately loves Haru, but that pursuing her is dangerous because she could be dead with one slip. When he feels jealousy or fear for her life, he feels a simultaneous mix of longing, care, and rage for his prey being stolen. He initially conflates love and predator instinct, and he doesn't know what that means. A common theme for the gentle wolf is treading rhetorical water and staying in stasis until a realization spurs him into action, usually appealing to his base desires and emotions, those intense feelings that he doesn't feel as often as he would like. And Haru being kidnapped, along with Louis' inaction, spurs him on yet again. And while he may have hesitated in other situations, Legosi knows two things at this point: that he loves Haru, and that it's up to him to protect her. A precious life is at stake, and he has to cast his reservations aside, because this is something only he can do.
狩猟本能から生まれた恋だとしても、お前は行動で結果を変えたいんだろう。逃げるな。
In the midst of battle, Legosi regresses a bit and initially thinks of Haru as prey. But then, he realizes that he is stronger because he's protecting something he cares about, and that he can temper his beast due to this. It is not a one-dimensional desire. It's different than prey, and it makes him much more than an instinctual beast. And with this pure-hearted mindset, he can grasp his desires with two hands and fully live life.
本能よりももっと手前にある俺を強くするシンプルなわがまま。早く会いに行こう。
This is where Legosi finally overcomes a big obstacle and realizes that he isn't asking for too much of life. What kind of a world would force him to stifle his connections and affection? He decides to be a little selfish, gaining in confidence and conviction in order to fulfill his own desire of protecting and connecting with those quote-unquote weaker than him. And he uses the power given to him to do that, yet doesn't lose himself in it. He finds a happy medium and tames his beast. And he decides to connect with Haru, to save her, bare his soul to her, and bask in her light. Because even if they consider being intimate a step too far for both of them right now, it's still a huge step forward for Legosi, from both total avoidance and detachment, and from submitting to his inner shadow. Yet despite this, he knows he must tame his beast even more and get even stronger before he can be at a state where he can safely pursue a love with Haru. And in the grander scheme of things, he must grow even more to become a happy and healthy adult in this society.
俺もっと強くなるよ。この社会にも本能にも負けないで君をちゃんと幸せにしたいからもっと強くなる。
待ってる。
Even taking the distance to his goal into account, this sense of perspective, maturity, and wide-reaching thinking is the crux of why Legosi will likely find his place. Because what Legosi doesn't see himself that is obvious to a few others, and especially the audience, is that he is the perfect person to make a breakthrough in this society. Wholehearted and compassionate, gentle yet with the resolve to achieve purpose and happiness. Unwilling to give in to the worst parts of himself, yet able to tame them to an extent to bring about positive change. Legosi is an example, and what's adorable is that he's too humble and ambitious to see it. He promises to get stronger without truly realizing how strong he already is and how far he's come. Though he isn't wrong, mind, there's still much progress to be had. I think this is a nice bit of commentary, intentional or otherwise, that we are all trying to do well for ourselves and reach some far-off place, but so focused on end results and the setbacks we experience that we fail to see where we have progressed. Things always tend to be made worse in our minds than they actually are, and it's not illegal to give ourselves credit while acknowledging that we still have to strive to improve. In a vacuum, and even more so if you compare his situation with that of the other characters, it's a massive understatement to say that Legosi is doing just fine. Throughout this early act of the story, Legosi's views on his animal nature are constantly evolving, yet never quite hit the mark of how he should be viewing them until he's forced into a situation in which it becomes something that helps him protect what he values. He fumbles through the story, repressing himself, learning not to give in to instinct, detaching from what he cares about out of hopelessness, and lacking the confidence and self-worth to attempt to overpower and control himself to an extent that would make a life he desires feasible. However, whenever the possibility of the things he holds dear being taken away from him rears its head, Legosi gets possessed by an unbreakable conviction. But because he's such a centered and dynamic character, what it means with regards to how he approaches his carnivore nature differs. Whether it be baring his fangs when the one he loves is put in danger, or withholding, being compassionate and sensitive, and not partaking in unruly black market dealings despite being tempted because he doesn't want to be that kind of person. Caring for creatures weaker than him by protecting them, and combating those who would use their power for ill. He has learned how to walk alongside the shadow within, and after all of his trials, he knows that he is able to harness it and remain centered. His nature is a weapon, and he decides when to keep it sheathed and when to unleash it. In thematic terms, Legosi is not a barbaric carnivore, nor is he an anti-carnivore. Legosi is simply Legosi, all parts of him acting in harmony in the moments that matter. He doesn't have to reject a fundamental part of himself, but he also doesn't have to let his bloodlust run rampant. He just needs to be himself, doing what he believes is right, in a healthy merger of control and desire. It has taken some time for him to come to learn this due to living in a society that tries to reductively categorize, but he's slowly learning. And in a setting that makes it so difficult and so rare for people to be exactly who they want to be outside of set roles, this is a remarkable thing.
でもさ、理解し合えないまま終わるなら、俺が狼に生まれた意味って何だったんだろう。
みんな案外それを探してるんじゃない？ 大人も子供も肉食も草食ももがいてるじゃん。
Legosi, someone who continuously tries to find a place for himself in a society that he has found has no place for someone like him, is the ideal main character to take us through this world that would seem to have nothing for someone in his specific situation with his specific mentality. He is our guide into the injustices, intricacies, and layers of Beastars, and through taming his shadow, he aims to transcend above it all to find what most of us are really looking for when it comes right down to it.
生きてる者の手が温かいなんてずっと当たり前のことだと思ってた。彼女を助けられればよかったはずだ。この手が冷たくならなければそれで。温かくて本当によかった。
Even though it's still very much a work in progress, Legosi used his predator instincts for good. He controlled them and something beautiful came out of it. So he is able to see the value in confronting himself and evolving from within. He is stumbling, unsure, looking for his place in the world and still not comfortable with how terrifying his carnivore side is. But slowly and surely, he's learning about who he is, how he wants to live, what he wants to do, who he wants to connect with, and the type of person he aspires to be. And he will continue to struggle in this difficult world to find a suitable, happy life. Because now, as opposed to earlier in the series, deep down he knows that he deserves happiness, and he'll do whatever he can to achieve it. Many thanks for watching.
何してるんだよ、こんなところで。それは俺の方か。